Have you ever wondered why Pontius Pilate washed his hands? Was it fear, guilt, or something even deeper? Pilate's story goes way beyond what most people know. He had the power to change everything, and yet he chose to wash his hands. Why did Pontius Pilate wash his hands? That single act became an eternal symbol of moral conflict and silent omission. What did he see? What was he so afraid of? Today we're diving into this real, dramatic, and shocking story. Get ready, because what happened to Pilate after the cross will truly surprise you. Stick around until the end. You'll never look at this story the same way again. Before we move forward, it's important to pause for a moment of essential reflection. Despite everything we've shared about the choices and consequences of Pontius Pilate, we must remember that none of it was ever outside of God's control. Even human decisions, no matter how flawed or cowardly they may seem, can never frustrate the Lord's plans. Everything Jesus endured, including the unjust trial and the crucifixion, was already part of God's divine plan from the foundation of the world. As written in Revelation 13, verse 8, Pilate, with all his weaknesses and failures, was merely an instrument within a much greater narrative. God is never caught off guard. Even as we examine the human and fragile side of Pilate, we must keep in mind that God's eternal purpose was perfectly fulfilled. The story we're telling reveals human drama, but it also quietly points to the sovereignty of a God who orchestrates everything, even when men make the wrong choices. Few names echo through history quite like Pontius Pilate. When we ask who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible, we discover a man who, despite holding Roman authority, hesitated when faced with the most important decision of his life. He wasn't just another governor. His signature sealed the fate of Jesus Christ. And the most fascinating part, even after declaring Jesus innocent, he still gave in to fear and public pressure. During the trial, Pilate found himself torn between the truth he knew and the fear of losing political control. It's here that we see Pilate in the crucifixion of Jesus as a classic example of choosing convenience over truth. Right there in the middle of the square, he made the decision that would forever change the course of human history. No wonder his most remembered act to this day is washing his hands. Now, if you've ever wondered why Pilate washed his hands, know that it wasn't just a simple symbolic act. It was a silent cry of a guilty conscience, a desperate attempt to disown the death of an innocent man. But is it really possible to wash guilt away with just water? The answer, as you'll soon see, carries lessons far deeper than a mere ritual. What few people realize is that this moment marked the beginning of the tragic downfall of Pontius Pilate. His attempt to dodge responsibility didn't save him from facing the consequences. And as we'll explore next, the price he paid for that decision was far higher than he ever imagined. Stay with me, because when we dive into the political climate of that time, you'll understand even better why Pilate found himself so trapped. Understanding who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible also means grasping the explosive setting he had to govern. Judea at that time was like a powder keg ready to blow. Imagine trying to lead a people fiercely proud of their faith, longing for freedom, while being ordered to keep control for an empire that didn't respect those beliefs. An almost impossible mission, right? And Pilate found himself right in the middle of that firestorm. The Jewish people, crushed under heavy taxes and the constant presence of Roman soldiers, didn't see their governors as leaders. They saw them as oppressors. It's no exaggeration to say this tension helped push Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus toward the ending we all know, in an environment where even a whisper could spark a revolt. A single wrong move could cost you your position or your life. This reality sheds light on why Pilate washed his hands. He knew that publicly standing with Jesus could be seen as an act of rebellion against Rome. Even though he held the power to do what was right, the fear of losing political control spoke louder, just like we see today. Too many leaders choose popularity over truth. It's a clear reminder that power without justice is like building a house on sand. And guess what? This tense political backdrop became the perfect storm leading to the tragic downfall of Pontius Pilate. Every move he made in front of the people, and the priest tightened the noose around his own neck. And that mounting pressure, my friends, paved the way for his ultimate collapse. A collapse we'll start uncovering as we dive into Pilate's early beginnings. To truly understand who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible, we need to step back in time and take a closer look at his roots. Pilate was born around 26 BC into a Roman equestrian family, basically the upper middle class of ancient Rome. He wasn't a senator, but he had the right connections, and just like today, having the right friends can open a lot of doors. So even without a record of major achievements, he climbed the ladder all the way to one of the empire's most strategic positions. The complete story of Pontius Pilate is like a puzzle with missing pieces. His early years are mostly a mystery, but one thing is clear. His rise was more about politics than merit. Sound familiar? Even today, we often see people reaching powerful positions more because of who they know than what they've accomplished. In Pilate's case, those connections catapulted him right into the heart of Judea's deep conflicts. When he became governor of Judea, Pilate faced an enormous challenge, managing a difficult people under the iron fist of Rome. And as we'll see, that setting became the perfect backdrop for the drama surrounding Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus. Imagine the weight of that responsibility in such turbulent times, when one wrong move could cost you your career or your life. This beginning already gives us clues about what happened to Pilate after the cross. Weak foundations, a career built on political favors, and little skill in handling cultural tensions were seeds that would later bear bitter fruit. Now let's dig into how Pilate's official duties shaped his destiny even further. When we talk about who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible, it's important to remember he wasn't just a symbolic figure. Pilate was Rome's right-hand man in Judea, tasked with keeping order, collecting taxes, and enforcing justice. Imagine carrying the weight of pleasing the emperor while dealing with the people who deeply resented you. Not an easy job, right? Especially when faith and politics are tangled up in the middle of it all. The complete story of Pontius Pilate shows us that he literally held the power of life and death in his hands. He was the only one who could authorize a crucifixion. That's why Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus are forever linked. No matter how much he tried to pass the responsibility onto others, the final decision was his. It's just like life. You can try to dodge responsibility, but your choices define your legacy. That's why his act of washing his hands became so famous. Many still wonder why Pilate washed his hands, trying to shift the blame for what he had decided. But a symbolic gesture doesn't erase a real choice. Just like washing dirty hands without changing your heart doesn't really clean anything. Pilate wanted to avoid the spiritual consequences of his choices. But by then, the wheels were already in motion. Every move Pilate made in office, no matter how small, was paving the road to his own downfall. While he thought he was playing the political game, he didn't realize he had already become a prisoner of it. And it's right in this intense atmosphere of pressure that the trial of Jesus unfolds. And that's exactly where we're heading next. Anyone who follows the story of who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible realizes that the trial of Jesus was a turning point, not only for the Christian faith, but also for Pilate's own life. Pilate found himself face to face with a man who, though accused, showed no sign of guilt. The gospel accounts make it clear that Pilate tried in every way to rid himself of the uncomfortable responsibility, but political pressure spoke louder than his conscience. In the middle of the chaos, Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus became forever intertwined. Even after recognizing Christ's innocence and trying to shift the decision to Herod, Pilate ultimately gave in to the crowd's demands. A striking detail from that time. During the Passover feast, it was customary to release a prisoner, and then something shocking happened. Pilate chose to set Barabbas, a criminal, free instead of Jesus, the innocent one. That moment explains a lot about why Pilate washed his hands. He knew he was committing a great injustice, yet he still chose to please the crowd. How many times do we also give in just to keep the peace or avoid trouble? Pilate became a symbol of that human weakness, the kind that tries to sweep mistakes under the rug, thinking no one will notice. But God always sees. And the saddest part is that this choice set in motion the tragic downfall of Pontius Pilate. Every action he took during that trial, every word, every gesture, pushed him closer to a dark and inevitable end. While the crowd celebrated the release of Barabbas, Pilate was silently sealing his own ruin. But it makes us wonder, what might have happened if he had chosen differently. It's impossible to talk about who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible without mentioning the mysterious intervention of his wife. At the height of the tension, Claudius sent an urgent message to Pilate. "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered greatly today in a dream because of him." Matthew 27, verse 19. This part of the complete story of Pontius Pilate reveals something deeply human: the conflict between what we know to be right and the pressure of the moment. Despite the clear warning, Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus moved forward, unfolding exactly as God's plan had ordained. If you still wonder why Pilate washed his hands, here's part of the answer. It was his last desperate attempt to distance himself from a guilt that was already eating him alive. But washing your hands doesn't cleanse your heart. Just like today, we can try to justify bad choices, but the echo of those decisions lingers, especially when we ignore wise counsel. And it was precisely this pattern of denial and avoidance that began to shape the spiritual consequences of Pilate's choices. From that moment on, the man who could have been remembered for his courage became forever known as a symbol of cowardice. And what happened to Pilate after the cross? You're about to see that his downfall went even deeper than most people realize. Many people wonder what happened to Pilate after the cross. And the answer isn't pretty. After the crucifixion of Jesus, Pilate continued governing Judea, but his reputation was already in ruins. He got involved in even more violent conflicts, including brutal crackdowns against Galileans and Samaritans, only fueling the growing resentment against him. It was as if every action he took after that trial pushed him one step closer to his own downfall. His complete story shows that his desperate grip on power led him to make even crueler decisions. One of the most infamous was the massacre of Samaritans at Mount Gerizim, which triggered a formal complaint to the governor of Syria. Imagine that a man who once tried to wash away his guilt with a simple gesture was now neck-deep in blood. The irony is overwhelming, isn't it? We can't forget that all of this was a direct consequence of Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus. The spiritual consequences of Pilate's choices started to surface in visible, devastating ways. His soul, already corroded by cowardice, seemed completely consumed by brutality. As the Bible teaches in Proverbs 14, verse 12, "There's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death." These tragic events put Pilate squarely in Rome's crosshairs. Political pressure mounted, and soon came the order for him to return and face judgment. What happened next? Oh, my friend, you'll see that Pilate's fall was even more bitter than any battlefield defeat. This is where the story takes an even darker turn. After so many complaints and scandals, Pilate was summoned to Rome to answer before the emperor. But here's the irony. By the time he arrived, Tiberius had already died. In other words, the very man he was supposed to face was no longer there to judge him, a detail that only deepened the uncertainty surrounding his fate. The complete story of Pontius Pilate shows that with the rise of Caligula, one of the most unpredictable emperors in Rome's history, Pilate's future was effectively sealed. No official hearing was recorded, but we know he was stripped of his position. Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus had left such a deep stain on his legacy that even the new rulers wanted nothing to do with him. In simple terms, he was discarded like dead weight from the empire. Many still wonder why Pilate washed his hands if his downfall was inevitable. But the truth is, washing your hands never fixes what's broken inside. Rome might have forgotten the gesture, but God never forgets. As Galatians 6 verse 7 reminds us, do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. The spiritual consequences of Pilate's choices had now come knocking on his door with full force. Exiled to the region of Gaul, what we now call France, Pilate watched his world collapse in silence. From a respected governor to a forgotten exile, his fall was swift and brutal. And, as we're about to see, the rumors surrounding his death cast even more mystery over this bitter ending. As we dig deeper into who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible, we reach one of the most mysterious parts of his story, his end. Early Christian tradition, cited by Eusebius of Caesarea, tells us that Pilate, consumed by guilt and disgrace, ultimately took his own life while in exile. The idea that Pontius Pilate committed suicide isn't officially confirmed, but it makes perfect sense when you consider the unbearable weight he carried. After all, how could anyone live with the memory of committing the greatest mistake in history? The complete story of Pontius Pilate is shadowed by this dark ending. Although there are some disagreements among historians, the most widely accepted account is that Pilate became his own executioner. It shows that the spiritual consequences of Pilate's choices didn't stay confined to the religious sphere. They took over his life, his mind, and his destiny. A powerful reminder that wrong choices have a way of haunting us all the way to our last breath. Interestingly, the narrative that Pilate was condemned for sentencing Jesus to death also served a theological purpose, to show that no one escapes divine justice. As Romans 2 verse 6 says, God will repay each person according to what they have done. Even though Pilate tried to wash his hands, he could never wash away his conscience. And the weight of that guilt has echoed through the centuries. But not every scholar accepts this version so easily. There are other possibilities about what really happened to him. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into next. You'll see that the mystery surrounding Pilate still sparks heated debates even today. As we take a deeper look into who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible, we come across an interesting divide. Not everyone believes Pilate took his own life. Some historians suggest he was simply forced into retirement, spending his final days as a forgotten former governor, living off a modest pension from Rome. This version paints a quieter, more faded Pilate, yet still marked by the spiritual consequences of his choices. The complete story of Pontius Pilate is full of gaps that fuel these different theories. Interestingly, ancient writers like Flavius Josephus and Tacitus, who could have documented his death, remain silent on the subject. That silence opens the door to endless speculation. Was exile an even crueler punishment than death? After all, living forever branded as the man who condemned Jesus is no small burden. From this perspective, Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus continue to echo as a lasting reminder of the eternal weight of our decisions. One mistake, made under the pressure of a crowd on a Passover afternoon, left a permanent scar on his story. And to think it all started with a simple act of washing his hands. Why did Pilate wash his hands? Maybe because deep down he already knew that no amount of water could ever wash his soul clean. These uncertainties only make Pilate's legacy even more enigmatic. And it's precisely that lingering mystery that keeps curiosity about his life alive even today. But even more fascinating is how his story still teaches us about choices, conscience, and consequences. And that's exactly where we're headed next, as we dive into the lasting moral impact he left behind. If we really want to understand who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible, we have to look beyond the historical facts and see the moral impact he left behind. Pilate isn't remembered just as a governor who oversaw the crucifixion of Jesus. He became the eternal portrait of human indecision. How many times are we also tempted to wash our hands instead of standing up for what we know is right? Pilate is that uncomfortable mirror history holds up to us. The complete story of Pontius Pilate shows that his mistakes didn't end at Calvary. The dilemma he faced before the crowd, choosing between truth and convenience, still echoes today. When we study Pilate and the crucifixion of Jesus, we see that his greatest defeat wasn't political, it was spiritual. The spiritual consequences of Pilate's choices have echoed through generations, serving as a silent warning to anyone tempted to make the same mistakes. That's why so many still wonder why Pilate washed his hands. It wasn't just fear of the crowd, it was fear of the crushing weight of responsibility. By choosing to release Barabbas, yes, Pilate chose to set Barabbas free. He forever defined which side of history he would stand on. And ironically, the very gesture meant to absolve him of guilt sealed his legacy as a symbol of cowardice. Even today, when we talk about moments of great omission in history, Pilate's name inevitably comes up. His legacy stands as a bitter but necessary reminder that every choice carries a cost. And now, after walking through his story so closely, it's time to show you how this reflection speaks powerfully into your own life today. So, what did this story stir up inside you? If this video about who Pontius Pilate was in the Bible spoke to your heart, don't forget, hit that like button. Drop a comment below sharing what impacted you the most. and subscribe to the channel so you can keep growing with us on this journey of knowledge. Your participation is so important. Every comment you leave helps spread this message to even more people who also need to reflect on the spiritual consequences of Pilate's choices and our own choices today. And hey, don't stop here. There's an amazing video linked in the card and in the description where we keep uncovering biblical mysteries few people have ever heard about. Go check it out, because when we truly understand the past, we can transform the present.